My job was simple. I was responsible for checking the oxygen compressors, backup generators, and equipment storage rooms in the basement level of a public university hospital in downtown Belo Horizonte. The wing was closed to patients after 10 p.m., and only one staff member stayed behind, me. The corridors were narrow, lined with old ceramic tiles and echoing pipes that clicked and hissed through the night. I walked with a clipboard and a flashlight, checking pressure levels, inspecting the tanks, and signing the forms. Everything was routine. I didn't have keys to the upper levels. My job was the basement, the service tunnels, and the loading bay near the old morgue entrance. I didn't ask questions. I needed the money. The first time something felt off, it was 12:47 IE. I had just finished my second inspection round when I heard a loud metallic echo, the sound of a heavy gate closing somewhere near the compressor room. I stopped, waited, but nothing followed. When I reached the far end of the corridor, I noticed the pressure room door was unlocked. I always checked it, always turned the handle twice. That night, it was slightly ajar. Inside, the lights were already on. That room had motion sensors. I stood at the door, heart suddenly tight in my chest. The compressor unit was humming like usual, the pressure was stable, nothing seemed wrong. Except for one thing, the clipboard that I had left hanging on the wall was now lying on the floor, next to the oxygen tanks. The pen was missing. The next night, I arrived 15 minutes early. I wanted to prove to myself that it had been a one-time thing. Maybe I forgot the door. Maybe the light was triggered by a rat. Maybe the clipboard just fell. I started the shift like always, turned on the flashlight, picked up the inspection sheet, unlocked the basement wing. The security office upstairs buzzed me through. No one else had access to this floor. But when I reached the first storage bay, the door was already unlocked. Not wide open, just slightly loose in the frame. I always double-checked the handle, always. In the utility closet, same thing. Then the electrical room, same. None of them were wide open. None of them looked forced, but all of them gave that soft, loose click when I tested the knob, the kind of resistance that tells you someone had turned it before you. I started to feel the sweat on my back despite the cold. The air in the basement was dense, recycled. The fan above the boiler wasn't turning. At 1:12 a.m., I passed by the compressor room again. The light inside blinked on before I got close. I was still 10 steps away. The sensor shouldn't have triggered. This time, I didn't enter. I waited, holding my clipboard tightly, listening. There were no footsteps, no movement, just a low hum, like the machine was trying to cover another sound underneath it. Something slower. Something breathing. When I finally forced myself to enter, the light was steady, the tanks were all full, the readings were normal. But the pen I had lost the night before, the one I hadn't replaced, was now resting neatly on the metal table beside my original clipboard. That Friday, I arrived even earlier. I changed my pattern, entered through the lower stairwell instead of the elevator, turned left instead of right. I skipped the first 2 rooms. I didn't touch anything at first. This time, I left the door to the water pump room open on purpose. Not wide, just enough to be noticeable on camera. I even nudged the trash bin out of place. Nothing dangerous, just irregular, something someone would fix if they were watching. Then I walked the rest of the route as usual, logging pressures, glancing at gauges, staying quiet. The corridors were colder than usual. My boots echoed louder. At 1:54 a.m., I returned to the pump room. The door was closed. The bin was back in its corner. I felt the adrenaline hit. I wasn't afraid of someone being there. I was afraid of someone working there, someone treating the place like theirs. When I turned the handle, the door opened easily. No one inside. No tools. No notes. But the log sheet I had taped to the inside wall, the one I used to track my timing, now had 2 entries for that night. And one above it written in the same pen I had lost 2 days ago. No name, no time, just a single check mark. I took a photo with my phone. The file corrupted when I tried to send it. Later, I checked the surveillance backup upstairs. The camera pointed at the pump room had stopped recording at 12:41, exactly when I entered the sublevel. On Saturday, I brought a portable recorder. Not my phone, an old digital voice recorder I used in medical school. I clipped it to my shirt and pressed record the moment I stepped into the basement. I didn't say anything at first, just walked. Let it run. Every 30 minutes, I whispered a brief log entry. Compressor normal. Tag 2 pressure steady. Room sealed, no sign of entry. When my shift ended, I sat in the locker room upstairs and played the audio back. The first hour was exactly what I remembered. My voice, my footsteps, the buzz of the hallway lights. But near the middle of the second hour, I heard something else. It was my voice, but I wasn't speaking. The tone was flat. No log entry, just a sentence I never said. All entries verified. No inconsistencies. All entries verified. The voice repeated it twice. No background noise, no footsteps, just that sentence, then silence. I checked the timeline on the recorder. The sentence had been recorded at 2:03 a.m. At that time, I had been in the backup generator room, not speaking, not even breathing loudly. I checked the camera footage from that corridor. Signal loss between 2:01 and 2:07. I went back downstairs, opened the compressor room again. The pen was gone. The clipboard was gone. And someone had written a number on the wall with a gloved finger. Not with ink, with condensation. I didn't scan another page. I sat for the next 3 hours at my original station, staring at the logbook, unable to write a single word. My hand hovered over the pen, but something in me refused to make a mark. Like it would finalize something I didn't want to name. At 4:47 a.m., the lights shut off completely for 3 seconds. When they came back, the hallway was silent again. The door to the corridor was closed. The next morning, I took a cab to the contractor's address listed on the onboarding form. The office was gone, replaced by a pet shop. No signage, no trace. I even asked the clerk inside how long they'd been there. Since 2019, he said. 4 years. I walked back trying not to think, trying not to make sense of it. When I got home, I unfolded the list of names again. I held it under my desk lamp, examining the faint outline of the last name, the one that had been erased. The graphite was nearly gone, but the pressure on the paper had left grooves. With the right angle, I could almost make it out. My name, already there, with a check mark beside it, already logged. I didn't expect much from the job. The ad mentioned night shifts, low pay, and old equipment, but I just needed something to keep me afloat in Brazil while I finished my paperwork. The hospital was in a small town in the interior of Sao Paulo, surrounded by eucalyptus fields and unfinished houses. When I arrived, the main gate was already open and the only sound was the buzzing of a loose wire on the streetlight. The building was uglier than I imagined, a mix of beige concrete and moldy white tiles, with a security booth that looked abandoned. I walked through the automatic doors and a woman in scrubs pointed silently to the stairs. She didn't ask for ID. She didn't even speak, just pointed, like she was tired of explaining the same thing over and over again. The imaging room was 2 floors up, near the end of a long corridor with flickering ceiling lights and uneven tiles. My station was a small corner with a stained chair, a cracked window, and a clipboard with half-erased notes from the last technician. They had quit the week before. No explanation, just a message on the logbook that read, "Don't open the door next to room 5, even if they knock." I thought it was a joke, some kind of initiation ritual. I even smiled when I read it. But when I looked down the hall past the numbered plaques above each door, I noticed something strange. There was no room 5. There was room 4, then a blank door, then room 6. At exactly 2:11 a.m., I heard the sound of knocking. 3 times. Not at the entrance, not at the window, somewhere behind the hallway. And I realized I had no idea which room it came from. No one asked about my shift the next morning. The day staff barely looked at me. I sat by the lockers and waited for the coordinator to hand over new forms, but he just mumbled something about printer issues and walked away. I wanted to ask about the layout of the second floor, about room 5, but I kept quiet. That night I arrived a bit earlier and walked the hall again. The corridor was colder than I remembered, and the air had that metallic hospital scent, bleach, gloves, and something else I couldn't place. The blank door between room 4 and room 6 was closed. No sign, no handle, just a faint rectangular shadow where a plaque used to be. I paused there for a second, pretending to stretch my neck while I stared. The hallway was quiet. Too quiet. Even with all the lights on, the air felt dim, and the space in front of that door, that exact tile, seemed just slightly more worn down than the rest, as if someone had been standing there for a long time. I returned to the imaging room and sat down, trying to focus, but the clipboard was gone, so was the pen I'd left. In their place, someone had left a pair of latex gloves, unused, still folded, and a note written in pencil on the back of an old scan request. You heard it too. I looked around. No footsteps. No signs of anyone else. Just the hum of the old machines and the buzz of the hallway lights. At 2:13 a.m., the knock came again. 3 times. Same rhythm, same silence after. But this time, I noticed something else. The door that wasn't supposed to exist, it was slightly open. I don't remember deciding to walk toward the door. One second I was seated, blinking at the old fluorescent light above me. The next I was standing outside the silent gap between room 4 and room 6, with the corridor behind me completely still. The door was just barely open, enough to see that the room inside was dark. No windows, no glow from machines or monitors. I pushed it slightly, expecting a heavy hospital door, but it moved with no resistance. Silent hinges. No label on the wall, just a square black void where a number should be. Inside, the air was cooler. The lights didn't turn on, but I could make out a small room. Square, low ceiling, no bed, just a single white plastic chair facing the far wall, the kind you'd find in a kitchen or a break room, completely out of place in a hospital setting. I didn't step in. I just stood in the doorway, staring at that chair. It was angled slightly, not centered, like someone had been sitting there watching something. Or someone. On the floor near the baseboard, I saw faint scuff marks, half circles in the dust, like the chair had been turned slowly, more than once. The silence pressed against my ears. I could hear my own breathing. The walls of that room absorbed every bit of sound. Not even the hallway buzz leaked in. Then I noticed something worse. The floor beneath the chair. It wasn't tile. It was cement. Rough, uneven, and slightly cracked, as if part of the room had been rebuilt or sealed. I stepped back, closed the door without touching the handle. When I returned to my post, the lights in the hallway flickered again, and the gloves on the desk were gone. I tried to ask about the room the next morning, casually during breakfast in the staff lounge. I said I had passed by a door between rooms 4 and 6 and asked if it used to be a supply closet or something. The nurse I spoke to froze for half a second, just enough for me to notice, then smiled without humor and said, "Those are admin offices. There's no room 5. I waited. She didn't say anything else. Later that day, I checked the building layout on a laminated floor plan taped near the elevator. There was no gap. Room 4 room 6, nothing in between. But I remembered it. I'd been inside. When I returned that night, the corridor lights were all working again. The clipboard was back, clean, with a new pen. Everything looked normal. Too normal. But the door was still there, between 4 and 6, closed tightly now. I pretended not to notice. Didn't stop. Didn't look. Just kept walking. At 1:52 a.m., I went to the staff bathroom down the hall. When I came back, the door was open again. Same angle as before, same silence inside. But now, the chair was gone. Instead, there was a mark on the floor where it had been. A perfect square of clean cement surrounded by dust. And above it on the wall, someone had scratched a sentence into the paint. Letters, faint, uneven. Sit here once, and it stays with you. I didn't sleep that day. I couldn't. I didn't show up for my next shift. I didn't call. I just left the badge and locker key in a small envelope, slid it under the security glass, and walked out before the sun rose. The air outside felt lighter. The streetlight wasn't buzzing. The road back to the bus station was empty, and for a while I let myself believe it was over. Just a strange place, a weird experience, something I could move on from. But the next night, around the same time, 2:11 a.m., I woke up in the apartment I was renting in Campinas, not to a sound, but to a silence. An unnatural pause in the middle of the city's noise. And then a knock, 3 times, from somewhere inside the building. I told myself it was a neighbor, a pipe, a dream. But I didn't sleep. 2 days later, I unpacked the last box from my move. At the bottom, under a mess of papers and chargers, I found something I hadn't seen before. A folded pair of latex gloves. Clean, unused. Same brand as the ones left on my station desk. And under it, a small white sticker, faded with one printed number. 5. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at it, unable to breathe. Hadn't brought anything from that hospital. Nothing. But the door had never been about the hospital. It was about me. And once I stood in front of it, it never really closed again.
It was my 4th week working the night shift at a private hospital in Recife. The building was modern from the outside, tinted glass, new reception desks, security cameras, but the upper floors were always half lit, quiet and strangely empty after 10 p.m. I was assigned to the 5th floor, mostly for post-surgical patients who needed light monitoring. That meant long stretches of silence, checking vitals every few hours, and making sure no one pulled out their IV line by accident. I didn't mind. The floor only had 6 rooms, and most nights only 2 or 3 were occupied. Room 509 at the far end of the hallway was marked as closed for maintenance since I started, lights off, door locked, no patients scheduled there. I passed it every night during rounds, sometimes twice, sometimes more if I had trouble sleeping. That Tuesday around 2:40 a.m., I was refilling a cart at the nurse station when I heard the distinct chime of a call button. A soft beep, beep. Then the red light on the panel blinked. Room 509. I stared at it, confused. I walked down the hallway, checked the door. Still locked, no light inside, no movement. I knocked once, quietly, just in case, but there was no answer. Back at the station, the light on the panel had stopped blinking. I left a note in the logbook for the morning team, just in case there had been a system glitch. But when I checked the log again at 5 a.m., the note was gone. The next night, I walked past room 599 during my first round at midnight. To my surprise, the light inside was on, not flickering, steady, warm, but the door was still locked. I hesitated, then checked the panel at the nurse station. No patient assigned, no recent changes. I even opened the digital dashboard for the entire floor. Room 509 was still marked in gray, unoccupied. At 2:00 IEM, I returned with the vitals cart and noticed something different. Through the thin gap between the door and the floor, I could see movement, shadows. Slow, steady, as if someone was pacing or shifting inside. I called the internal line to security, no answer. The guard on night shift usually stayed near the lobby downstairs and didn't patrol the floors. I didn't feel justified calling an emergency. There was no scream, no fall, no alarm. Just that slow movement and the light. I leaned closer. The sound inside wasn't loud, but I could hear something brushing lightly, like fabric against bedding. Then a soft metallic click, like the bed rails shifting. Close your eye. I stepped back, went to the station, logged a maintenance alert. In the morning, the alert had been deleted, and the light in room 509 was off again. But when the housekeeping cart passed by at 7:30 a.m., I noticed something I hadn't seen before. A folded towel, freshly used, sitting on the chair outside the room. Slightly damp. On Wednesday night, I brought the master key with me during rounds. I didn't ask permission, I just wanted to see for myself. The hallway was calm, one patient asleep, one watching television with headphones. The lights above room 509 were dimmer than the rest, not off, just slightly faded, like the bulbs hadn't been replaced in a while. I stood in front of the door. The panel showed nothing. The system said the room was empty, but I felt something shift on the other side. Not a sound, not a shadow, just pressure. I slipped the key into the lock. It turned. The door didn't open immediately. I pushed gently. It resisted. Not locked. Not stuck. Resisting, as if someone inside was pressing their palm against it from the other side, slowly. I didn't push harder. I didn't ask anything. I just froze, heart pounding in my throat, hand still on the handle. And then, as suddenly as it had resisted, the door gave in, slightly, just enough to let out a thin gust of air that smelled faintly of metal and alcohol. I stepped back, closed the door, locked it again. Back at the station, I opened the maintenance records for the last 2 months. Room 509 wasn't listed. No requests, no reports. It didn't even appear on the printable layout for the 5th floor. But I had just touched the doorknob, felt the weight behind it, smelled the inside, and when I looked at my palm, the one that had pressed the handle, it was damp. Thursday night, I brought my phone, not to report, just to record. I wasn't thinking about sharing it, I just needed to confirm that what I was seeing was real. Around 2:15 a.m., I approached room 509 again. The lights were on. No sounds. I stood at the far end of the hallway and pressed record, keeping the camera aimed straight ahead as I walked slowly forward. As I passed rooms 505, 507, the lights were identical, sterile, still. But when I reached 509, my screen dimmed slightly. The hallway in the video looked colder, almost greenish, and the light under the door, it wasn't yellow like the others. It flickered, pale blue, like the backlight of an old television. I stopped filming and played it back. Everything was fine until I reached the frame of 509. There was a shadow standing in front of the door. Tall, thin, perfectly still. that I hadn't seen anything in real time. I paused the video, rewound, slowed it down. The figure didn't move. Didn't breathe, just stood there for 3 full seconds before the screen glitched and skipped to the end of the recording. When I looked up from my phone, the hallway lights flickered, and room 509's door was open, just a crack. I took 1 step forward, then 2. I held my phone again, this time ready to record inside. But when I reached the doorway, the room was completely dark. Not flickering, not blue, just empty. I didn't enter. I turned off the phone and walked away. The video was gone the next morning, deleted from my gallery, not in the trash. Nowhere. I requested a transfer the following Monday. I didn't mention room 509. I just said the floor felt too isolating at night, that I preferred more active sectors. No one argued. My next shift was in another building, same hospital network, but on the opposite side of the city. New facility, new team. More patients, more cameras, more movement. I thought I'd feel safer. On my second night there, I was helping a nurse reposition a patient when I heard it again. The faint beep beep of a call button. It came from the other end of the hallway. Room 509. I froze. Walked over, checked the panel. Room 509 didn't exist in this building. The last room was 508. The wing ended in a fire door. I said nothing. Took a break early, drank water, sat alone in the staff room. Later that night, around 3 a.m., I went to check on a post-op patient who had requested extra blankets. As I stepped into the room, I noticed something on the side table, a clipboard with fresh intake papers, not for the patient in the bed. Different name, different age, male, room assigned 509. I blinked, looked again. The clipboard was gone. The nurse assisting me hadn't noticed anything. Neither had the patient. But when I opened my locker at the end of the shift, I found something tucked between my extra scrubs and ID badge. A used hospital bracelet. Name illegible. Room 509.